Thank you for joining us today. I'm Johnny Anderson. I'm joined today by Trevor Loudon from trevorloudon.com, McKeeWiki.org, Jeff Nyquist from jrnyquist.blog, and Jimmy from Brooklyn. Trevor, welcome back. We'll start with you. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks, guys. It's good to be here and good to catch up.
Indeed. Jeff, how are you?
Okay, very exciting things happening. 2026 is going to be a big year.
Yes, it is. And Jimmy, how are you doing today?
Oh, freezing, but otherwise okay.
Oh, yes. Yes, I heard that New York got blasted. So has everybody survived the storm except for Trevor? Obviously, you're in sunny Florida, so you didn't get much down there. But
we've had bone-chilling temperatures of 75 degrees down here.
75 degrees, yeah. Oh,
no, it's actually
I could hardly get out of my hardly get out of my neighborhood. All the roads are covered in ice and snow. If I didn't have four-wheel drive, I couldn't have gone to the store yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Everything that happened in North Carolina was basically nothing. You didn't get much. Not what they said you were going to get.
No, we got maybe a couple inches of snow, not the 15, 20. We got this weird kind of hail, and we didn't get an ice storm, so we didn't lose power. So, but there's more predicted for this weekend. We're going to get more. Yes. And by the way, it was 10 degrees the other night. It's going to be 6. We're going to have a 6-degree night, 6 degrees Fahrenheit. The snow is not melting. It's staying on the ground, and we're getting more. So this is just like Michigan.
Yeah.
Northern Michigan.
Yeah. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Jimmy, how was New York? Yeah. You say you're freezing up there?
It's my apartment. There's not enough heat. But it used to be when we have storms like this, the city would hire people to shovel snow. And the media seems like they're praising this communist mayor, but he inherited an organization, the sanitation department, who already knows how to handle storms. But they didn't hire any people now, emergency crews, to shovel the snow. So the trucks plow the streets over and over. So they plow the street, then they plow it again, even if there's no snow on the street. The side streets are still, you can't hardly get through, and cars are buried in snow. And people at the bus stop, they got to climb over a 3-foot-high mound of snow to get to the bus. So it's kind of mismanagement here. And the city goes crazy when there's 3 inches of snow. So it's cold here. We had 10 degrees a few times with the heavy howling winds. I haven't seen this in many, many years. It's kind of like chaos here.
Yeah, I understand the mayor of New York, the newly sworn-in mayor of New York, is going to start holding rent rip-off hearings. Have you heard of this?
I heard of it. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe people are paying rent and not getting the services they're supposed to get, because that is the reality here.
I think basically he's kind of he's looking at it in terms of, I guess the tenants are living in substandard conditions and the landlords don't seem to want to fix it. Apparently that's an ongoing problem in the city.
Well, there's a lot of buildings here owned by the city, and they have some of the worst violations that aren't fixed. So if the landlords can't collect enough rent to do the repairs, that's what happens. But there's city-owned buildings that are in worse shape, and that's already government-controlled. It's mismanagement, and this mayor's not doing this. He's a socialist. He's not doing this to help the tenant. He's doing this because they're against capitalism and free markets, because they're praising some buildings that the tenants took over, and those buildings are full of violations also. So the mayor is a revolutionary, so he's just waging war against the free market. It may inadvertently help some of the citizens, but so far it doesn't look like that's the case, because you have city-owned buildings in disrepair.
Since last week, we've had these incidents taking place, and I wanted to get your take on it, Trevor. These groups that are being steamed up out there in the streets, this is 100% organized. Looking at it, what's going on in Minneapolis?
Yeah, it's organized primarily by the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is the same groups that organized the original George Floyd riots in 2020 and the riots in LA a few months ago, the anti-ICE riots there. It's 100% orchestrated by them. They are pro-China and also deeply in bed with Venezuela. They've sent more than 5 delegations to Venezuela in the last couple of years. Very violent, very Maoist, very well organized. They're also the groups primarily behind every time the Republican Party has a convention every 4 years, they organize a massive protest outside that. So this is who it is, but the Communist Party USA is up there. Democratic Socialists of America is also very big in the town, as other communist groups. Every communist group is involved, but the primary actor is the Freedom Road. And also the Muslim groups, CARE and other Students for Justice in Palestine, Palestinian youth movement. This is a concerted red-green axis insurrection organized primarily and centered around the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And if the government wanted to shut it down, they'd just go and shut down the Freedom Road and most of it would go away.
Yeah, these groups, I mean, the organization, I was going over some of this with Lee a couple of days ago, and we were looking at the way that they're all coordinated, and he was explaining everything, and I'm just sitting there and I'm taking it all in, and I said, that's Chinese training. The whole thing through and through. That's Chinese. I said the Russians aren't that thorough. I said they like that kind of stuff, but they're not that thorough. I said that's Chinese training all the way.
100%. Yeah, this is a Chinese operation. Not to say that the Venezuelans and the Cubans aren't involved, but the primary groups are pro-China.
There's a little bit of a debate, a little bit maybe of a breaking split in the Democratic Socialists of America. There's people in the Democratic Socialists of America complaining about the DSA's link to communist China. And one of the people that are DSA who don't want the connection to China, this is a quote now, "This isn't what I signed up for, and I imagine it's not what a majority of the members signed up for," said the outraged member who is part of the DSA's international committee. So the fact that the DSA is openly working with communist China, having meetings with them and working together, there are some people who might be socialists who don't want to embrace the communist movement, knowing how bad communist China is. But it all adds up to the world communist movement. I found another one of my communist publications. I was talking recently about the Lenin's Party of a New Type, the Communist Party, which is key to all this. This is a booklet, 50 pages or so, the Communist Party and mass organizations in the USSR. But this applies to every country all around the world. And it's fascinating what they write. I mean, it's not even a conspiracy. And then I refound another publication, The Tasks of the Youth, by Joseph Stalin, and it describes the need to get control of the schools and universities to build a young communist group who's going to be the growing group that takes over from the old guard. So all of this is organized, all of this is pre-planned, coordinated. You have offshoots. So you have the Communist Party, and then from that you have spin-off groups, the groups that I thought were more like obscure, crazy groups. And of course, Trevor points out that these groups are very dangerous. They're very skilled, very well thought out, very well trained. And when you pull them all together, it's like each one is a brick. But each brick, you put them together, you build a massive wall with a collection of bricks. That's what this is. You have the Communist Party itself, the Labor, the Workers' Party, and all these offshoots and spin-offs and other groups been penetrated. So this is absolutely a mass movement. The other day, I was surprised. I heard on Katz and Cosby and WABC Radio, Bill O'Reilly was warning about the danger we're in and we could lose the country because of foreign enemy agents building a movement of insurrection in this country. That's Bill O'Reilly. Now, things are really bad when Bill O'Reilly realizes this. I mean, it's that bad. And even Mark Levin the other day was talking about the Democrats are learning from the communists.
Jimmy, why are they so blind?
I don't know. They don't pay attention.
Because we won the Cold War.
They don't reach out.
Invested in that.
Yeah.
They don't reach out for information.
No,
we reach out and seek.
I was told before Christmas. We reach out and seek. Yeah, I was told before Christmas, and to your point, Jimmy, just so we don't lose it, I was told before Christmas, somebody was speaking to the director of the FBI, Director Patel, and they said that basically they have nothing on Antifa. They have basically nothing. They're blind by 20 years almost. But yet, are any of our phones ringing off the hook? No. Trevor, you should be number one on the call list. Yeah,
look, the FBI has nothing on these people at all. They've been forbidden from investigating them since the 1970s. The only one time they went after Freedom Road was in 2010 when they arrested 22 of them in Chicago and Minnesota for working with FARC, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And they had them for support for terrorism facing 20-year sentences. And Eric Holder dropped all the prosecutions, I think partly because many of them were found to have worked with Obama in Chicago. So the FBI is completely blind. Look, I could have, when the George Floyd riots were going on, I could have given the FBI a list of the 100 biggest activists behind all of that. And if they'd gone after them, they could have shut down the whole thing. But I didn't get a phone call.
Listen, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine describes themselves as a Marxist-Leninist revolutionary group. When Ahmad Jabril was the leader decades ago, they were actually putting bombs on airplanes. So they're not suicide bombers. They're not really the fanatical Muslims. They are communists working among Muslim people. Now, not far from me, in what used to be an Italian neighborhood, there was a banquet hall where people get married and all kind of big celebrations are there. Well, that's now a Muslim community center. Recently, there was a fundraiser there, and they're selling trinkets and stuff from Hamas, Hezbollah. So the radical movement in this country, it's definitely Islamo-Leninism, Enviro-Leninism. It's a big mess. It is absolutely a big mess. Totally organized, trained, coordinated. I mean, when Bill O'Reilly warns about it, when Mark Levin talks about the communist influence among the Democrats, it's getting so bad that they see it now. 40 years after me and you guys. Well,
it's to a point now where they can't. I mean, it's in everybody's face. I mean, what are you going to do? What I don't hear from anyone such as AG Bondi, I don't hear it from Kash Patel. I don't hear it from even what's his name, Stephen Miller. I don't hear it from any of these people that these are communist insurrectionists. I just hear that this is, these are radicalized groups, but I don't hear the key word anywhere.
Yeah, and that is the key word. How do you? It's like fighting World War II, but never talking about Nazis.
Exactly. So you've got to be able to point to where it's coming from, and you have to list the connections to China, like you're talking about, Trevor. All of this has to be brought out. If they're having trouble, and you always see the federal agencies wherever, or even state agencies, local agencies, you always hear them soliciting the public for help on their investigations. Right. So if you got somebody within the public that knows more about what they're dealing with, then of course they're going to bring them on as a consultant or a source of information to help them with their investigation. Right. Because nobody's going to have better eyes than the public in a lot of cases when it comes to dealing with groups on the ground like that, of people just doing their usual business in their everyday lives. But they're not telling people who they need to be looking for.
Yeah. They should be listing the DSA. Well, who told me this? Somebody told me this. Was it you, Jimmy? You were talking to an FBI guy and saying, you guys should go after Democratic Socialists of America. And the FBI guy said, oh, no, we can't do that. They're democratic.
Well, so are the Russian Social Democrats. They
operate. This is why they operate under those names. But see, democracy to the communists right, democracy is ruled by the people, and the people are led by their Communist Party. So blacks are led by their communists, gays are led by their communists, all the Popular Front, all People's Front, United Front, they're all led by their communists. And when you collect it all together in one movement, it's the communist movement working through the Democrat Party. And this is all public information, but nobody seeks it out. See, if it's not in their face, they don't see it. So I was putting it in their face, and they didn't utilize it.
See, this is my theory. The Trump administration and most administrations will do anything not to offend the Chinese. China gave us COVID, and they managed the response and killed hundreds of thousands of people, but they want to keep the trade going. Black Lives Matter was completely a Chinese operation. People died because of that. Cities burned because of that. But you're not allowed to say it because that might interrupt the trade flows. That might interrupt the golden handshakes and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's the same thing now. It's like when Kennedy was assassinated. They all knew that it was the Russians, but you can't say that because that would have sparked World War III. You can't say the Chinese
millions would die.
Yeah, millions would die. You can't say the Chinese are burning our cities because that will disrupt the trade and possibly spark a war. You can't say the Chinese are killing 80,000 people a year with fentanyl because that might, make things more expensive in Walmart.
What you could say is what the communist press says. So that newspaper I talk about all the time, The Independent, INDY, Independent. That newspaper is from the Democratic Socialists of America. They work with the Communist Party of Russia. So that's the communists in that newspaper. They write things like how they ended the Vietnam War with mass protest. And then they talk about the great time they had, the protest worldwide, the militant protest against the World Trade Organization. Then they say that fizzled, and then they had the Occupy Wall Street. So they're repeating all those things the communists did. And then they say now we're more experienced, we're better trained, better coordinated, and better networked. And if Trump tries to steal the election, we're going to be out in the street bigger, better, more militant than ever. That's what came out when Floyd was killed. And I laid this out on Sebastian Gorka's radio show, and he swore to the audience there's not going to be any violence. You're wrong, he said. Now, not only that, as that's going on, in the Revolutionary Communist Party's newspaper, they were writing, and this is a direct quote from the paper, about a shooting in Chicago Saturday night, 25 people were shot. You have to quit killing each other. You got to get out of the street and into the revolution. There are better things to fight and die for. So you add those two things I just said, plus as a kid among communists, when I was a kid, the communists were openly talking about what they want to do with American youth, particularly minorities, is politicized, radicalized, militarized. And now you hear that the Latin kings are working with these radical left-wing groups. So you have the KGB mafia working with the men, the adults, organized crime worldwide, all the different crime groups. And now you have clear evidence that what I said was right. They're working among prisons and street gangs. So this is going on. I laid it out in Sebastian Gorka, and he swore I'm wrong. There's going to be no violence. He was wrong. And he supposedly has a PhD in political science. These are the people that are advising the top people in our government. Mark Levin knows me. Rudy Giuliani knows me. They both praised me for my work. They said they learned a lot from me. So you have people out there who know me, who could be telling people you should listen to Jimmy and his friends. Whenever I talk, I always mention Trevor Loudon, Jeff Nyquist, and, everybody else that we're dealing with, because there's only a few of us. But they don't want it, because they would have to look like they were wrong that we defeated communism. So we defeated communism. This is why now they specifically say the Chinese Communist Party, instead of realizing it's the world communist movement. It's basically one party composed of different countries. And people just don't see it that way because it's a horrific thing to realize. So we are living in kind of a state of horror and terror that we know it and can't seem to alert people and do much about it.
I would like to play this clip really quickly, and then Jeff, you can jump in on this because you know who this guy is. You had dinner with this guy. I played this before, but Trevor, to your point, why aren't we saying that the drugs are coming from the cartels that are run by Russia and China? Why aren't we saying that? Well, at the time, our general of Northcom and Southcom were in the halls of Congress in Senate Armed Services Committee saying exactly that.
We're really treating the symptoms, counter narcotics, migration, human trafficking, those kinds of things are symptoms in my mind of a broader problem. And that's transnational criminal organizations who create an environment that's not conducive to raising a family for economic success. And we see that happening right on our border in Mexico. My concern with that, Senator, is the instability it creates, the opportunity it creates for actors such as China, Russia, and others who might have nefarious activities on their mind to seek access and influence in our AOR from a national security perspective.
Do you see evidence of that at this time?
There are actors who are very aggressive and active all across the Northcom AOR, to include in the Bahamas and Mexico, China and Russia. I would point out that the largest portion of GRU members in the world is in Mexico right now. Those are Russian intelligence personnel, and they keep an eye very closely on their opportunities to have influence on U.S. opportunities and access.
General Richardson, this is your AOR. Would you concur with the general's assessment?
Yes, Senator.
The largest forward deployment in the world of Russian military intelligence is on America's doorstep. Jeff, go ahead.
In Mexico. Yeah, no, that's right. They increased their embassy staff massively out of the Russian embassy in Mexico. And this situation is bad in Canada as well. It's getting bad there. And of course, we have an open border with Canada. And one of the things Lee Wheelbarger alleges is that Chinese have bought property on the Canadian border and the Russians have bought adjoining property on the U.S. side of the border, right? So that they can smuggle weapons into the U.S. Why? Well, this goes back to Scott Gilbranson's The Silent Invasion, where he's tracking 25 years ago Chinese weapon shipments through Ensenada into Mexico and then over the American border to creating secret arms caches in the U.S. And this is, why would you create secret arms caches in the United States? Not just for revolution, because you intend to bring hundreds of thousands of PLA soldiers as illegal aliens into the United States in advance of bombing and invading the place. That's hard for people to understand, but it was Colonel Lunev, a GRU officer who defected from the Soviet Union or from the Russian Federation, in the 1990s, who said they're planning to invade the United States in the future using the model of the Hitler's invasion of Norway, which was an infiltration invasion where they set up, guess what? They smuggled arms through Sweden into Norway in advance of their invasion. And that's how they invaded and took Norway right under the nose of the British Navy, by the way. The invasion came right through the British fleet, believe it or not. So that's an amazing thing. And they can't invade America. How many Chinese are in Mexico, Canada, and U.S. right now?
Yeah. Trevor, your thoughts on the clip I just played?
Yeah, well, it's what action has become of it. General Van Herk was saying exactly what Joseph Douglas has said, what Jeff's been saying for years. The international drug trade is a communist weapon against the United States. It's been made very plain with fentanyl. I don't think anybody would deny the Chinese are behind that, but they've been behind the opium trade, the marijuana trade, cocaine. The drug sales are a weapon, a communist weapon against the country. But how deep is the corruption? How many people are on the take? How many banks would get exposed if it was fully dealt with? How many public officials would have to stand down? When things get really entrenched and drugs entrench corruption, it becomes particularly hard to root it out or get people willing to make a stand on it.
Yeah, and this is the problem they're dealing with in Canada is the Chinese triads. They've moved organized crime into the country, and we've got that from the Sidewinder report in the early 90s from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Intelligence Services. They get themselves into the local businesses, they get themselves into local real estate, into commercial real estate, and they reverse infiltrate the country, buy off the politicians. That's exactly what they do. That's what they've done. And you were told when you were in Canada, and I believe it was at this conference where you had dinner with General Van Herk, you were told at that conference by an ex-MP in Canada, tell your friends in America that the Chinese are taking us over.
Right. She said they'd already done it, is what she said. We have been taken over by China. That's what she told me. She sat next to me at dinner. It was the next night after I had had dinner with General Van Herk and his deputy. What you hear on the political, the military, the cultural, educational, environmental, and of course, the strategic threat from hypersonic missiles and long-range cruise missiles from submarines, you're hearing an attack on a preparation to take down the United States on every front. That's what you're hearing. And you won't hear anything about it from the president, neither Biden nor Trump nor Obama nor Bush. You will hear nothing about it from any of those. You won't hear it from the well-thought, famous, wise analysts from MAGA, from the Democratic left. You won't hear about it. You won't hear about it in Congress. And the problem is that they have the infiltration and the preparation for taking down the United States has been decades, been a century in the making since the Bolshevik Revolution. And they in controlling information. And they also believe in controlling what people think they can say safely. And you have a culture now, unlike you had 100 years ago, which is, as Neil Postman says, is post-literate. People don't read. They watch, they look at headlines, they absorb. And so you've got a post-literate president, President Trump. He doesn't read. He doesn't like to read his briefing papers. He likes to hear things verbally. Well, he actually likes to talk even more than he likes to read. So you have a problem. And then you have, look, this book is Twilight of the Presidency, right? This book was written, 40, 50 years ago. It's a classic, right? And this is what it reports about the presidency going back. I think this is maybe Jimmy Carter era. Okay. So here, the inner life of the White House is essentially the life of a barnyard. Below the president is a mass of intrigue, posturing, strutting, cringing, and pious commitment to irrelevant windbaggery. Now, you look at the Trump administration, it's the same thing, right? Nothing has changed in 5 decades and half a century. This is the environment, people, in which the communists, who are very well organized at this sort of thing, thrive. They thrive, and their messages become the messages, whether it's Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and, of course, Alex Jones on the right, or it's CNN and ABC and MSNBC and all those idiots on the left. It's basically two versions of let's commit suicide together tomorrow.
I'm holding a copy of a very old book in my hands. You can see the condition that it's in. And to be honest, given the age of the book, I'm sorry you can't see it, Jimmy, but given the age of the book, I would say it's in pretty good condition. The binding is still good. It's still perfectly legible. This book was printed in 1938. I found it hiding in a bookshop in London, and it's called Persons in Hiding by J. Edgar Hoover. It was the first book that he wrote.
I've never heard of that book.
Oh, yes. It's very, very difficult to find. But this is before he wrote about, this is before, the communist threat took hold. And he wrote about that later on in his career. But this is before, at the time of writing, it was still the Bureau of Investigations. And he was tasked with the responsibility to clean up the organized crime problems. The John Dillingers, Muggsy Bogues, these people, George Nelson. And that's what this book is about. However, in here, he talks about, from the organized crime perspective, he says, and this is in the 20s, he's writing this, and it's later published. He says, behind every politician, no matter who it is, you're going to find the corruption. There's going to be a nasty, dirty, corrupt network behind all of it, because you're going to find organized crime networks behind all of it. Mm-hmm. In the 20s, he was 100 years ago, he was saying this.
Well, remember, Prohibition really made that happen.
Yes.
And we need to remind everybody that organized crime is organized by the police and the mayors. That's not right. A joke. Right. The best brandy in Chicago in 1927 was in the mayor of Chicago's office. And every one of the cops, when Al Capone was bringing the liquor ashore from Lake Michigan from Canada, every one of the cops that was assigned to that were standing on that beach to make sure that all went off without a hitch. And they were sending their kids through college on the money they were getting from their part of the take.
The first raid that Elliot Ness and his group went on to, they walked across the street from their office. One of his guys asked him, "Are you sure you're ready to do this?" He says, "Because you got to be willing to go all the way." Mm-hmm. And Ness said, "Yep." He says, "Let's go." And so they walked across the street from their office into the post office building. And that's where it started.
Yeah, sure. Because see, the thing that really where it really started was before Prohibition, we prohibited cocaine and some other narcotics. And there was a branch, I think it was a very small branch of the Treasury Department. I forget the name of it. And they immediately became corrupted because these cops were to police a handful of people who were involved in the cocaine trade in America. And they realized they now had a monopoly because they could allow those criminals to continue clandestinely in their business and pay them off. And so that's exactly what began to happen. And everybody in the government, in the Treasury Department, and in other departments of government who were kind of looking at what they were doing saw that they were corrupt. And it was well known. But then you get Prohibition and liquors everywhere, and then the corruption just took off. It was incredible in this country.
That's why the left wants to legalize all drugs. They say this is how you prevent it from getting what grew out of the Prohibition, which, of course, if we legalize all drugs, or if you're a libertarian insanity, that everybody should have a right to do what they want to do. If everybody decides they want to jump off a roof, or if every kid decides wants to shoot heroin, you can't have that. At some point, you have to try to stop it. Some battles are not winnable. You have to keep fighting. Some battles you may not win, but you have to still keep fighting. And the North Korean dictator was fascinated with the Hollywood movies about the mafia. It wasn't so much he was interested in the mafia because it's an interesting subject. He saw the value of the corruption they could have. And that's why now you got the KGB mafia, you got all these groups being networked and coordinated at a high level. While all of that's going on, there's this other movement that looks to most people like it's not connected. That's this global environmental movement, which is going to cripple Western societies economically under the guise of saving the planet. So we are being attacked from left, right, top, bottom. We're like in the center and we're encircled and being shot at. It's really hard for people to understand it. People, it's not, you're allowed to be a commie. You're not allowed to be an anti-communist. That's the cultural thing in America pretty much right now.
This was the whole point of going after organized crime and Khrushchev and the Operation Friendship of Nations taking over and creating the cartels and taking over the drug trade and international drug trafficking was they wanted to be able to have access to that high value information. The best way to do that was to gain political corruption was to get into organized crime. And so they took everything over. We look at organized crime in the West as one thing. But if you go to places like North Korea, or you go to places like Russia or like China or Iran or one of these countries, or Venezuela or Cuba, organized crime is not what we understand organized crime as. Organized crime in those countries is an extension of the state intelligence services. This is what we don't understand. We think that organized crime is the same everywhere. This is the problem that I've had before. I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure others have been guilty of it. Jeff, you've probably fallen victim to this too, and Trevor and Jimmy, and I know that General Hodges he even admitted that he was, and it's big of him to admit, mirror image. We think that because we think as the way we do, everyone else does too. Our adversaries think the same way we do. They don't.
Russians are very different, and the Chinese also very different from us in their culture and their background. The fact that Russia and China have always had authoritarian, despotic government. They've never really had a real democracy, not even Boris Yeltsin. If we take Yevgeny Albats's testimony seriously, she actually writes that under Boris Yeltsin, the fear was underlying it, that it was the people were more afraid than under Gorbachev. That's a remarkable thing. She says that at the end of her book, The State Within a State, about the KGB still being there. She was on the commission, by the way, that was supposed to take the KGB apart. She resigned from the commission because she realized the whole process was fraudulent. And the only reason why she's not dead, by the way, is she has moderated her tone somewhat, and her father's a GRU general. So but she's in the United States. She's a defector now. And the thing is that why are Russia and China, why North Korea, why Cuba, why are they so corrupt? Why are the communist regimes so corrupt? Because the same reason prohibition only times 10. In America, under prohibition, alcohol was illegal. And that meant everybody, the corruption, look at the Kennedys, their money came from that. People got rich. And politicians became corrupt. Yes, with prohibition. Yeah. And but under a socialist system, all economic activity is illegal. All private economic activity. The state has an absolute monopoly. Trotsky bragged that nobody can revolt against us because everyone works for us. We have a monopoly on employment. And so what is the rule for corruption then? You're a state official. It's a license to rob. Who is going to stop you from doing it? All the officials are doing it. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn pointed out, the police can rob anyone they want in the Soviet Union. And they did. And so because everybody just to survive has to commit an economic crime. So they're all guilty.
Yeah. And so you think
can enforce on anyone.
Yeah. And you think to yourself, okay, well, I'll just turn to the black market, right? Because that's what keeps these despotic countries going is the underground black market economy. I got news for you. The intelligence services in those countries, they own the black market. They set it up. Yeah, they run it.
The police are the creators of organized crime.
That's right.
This is why you cannot, if you make normal human behavior criminal, right? Murder, stealing, all these things are wrong. If you criminalize what is normal human economic behavior, the police will become the criminals. That's like a law of history. And this is what is happening in the West as we progressively create more and more crazy laws. This is how you do it. And unfortunately, socialism, that's why socialism is a cancer on the body politic everywhere it is. And it destroys economies, it destroys individuals, it destroys culture, it destroys honesty, it destroys morality, it destroys the government. Absolutely becomes this illegitimate criminal operation, like in Beijing, like in Moscow. And now Washington is more and more this way, whether you have a Democrat or a Republican in there.
I think there's a basic tendency for people to get what they could get. So I think there's a basic tendency for most people everywhere to be corrupt, not only because they have to, but because they can. But I think once somebody becomes a communist, then they're driven to do everything to achieve their goal of defeating the West. I don't understand how people embrace communism and they'll fight and die for it, And we don't have a corresponding counter to that where we could get people out in the street to riot against George Soros or whoever else is out there creating havoc against this country. They have a way of getting control of the people's minds and emotions and propelling them out in the street willing to die for their cause. That's what's scary to me. Because then now that you got these religious groups, every religion now is involved in this environmental movement to save the planet basically from capitalism. So they get people, if you get control of people's religion and people follow that religion, you get control of all the people that are in that religion. So we see what the communists did with Islam. They promote the most radical strain of Islam to attack the West. Well, they got this now with the environmental movement, where they have the Catholic Church. A lot of mainstream churches are now involved in this global government stuff, working with the UN. I mean, they just had this meeting recently, and it's all out in the open. It's all out in the open. So we have countries in Europe who seem to be backing Ukraine, but all of those countries are working with China and working for this global government stuff. So the enemy works on different levels, different directions, different echelons. It's incredible how they built this massive movement right in front of us, and people can't see it. Sometimes things are too big, too horrible, and that's maybe why people don't see it. We sought out, we seek and found the information. Other people don't look for it. If it's not put in their face, they don't see it. Even when I put it in their face, they don't see it.
Yeah, and to your point, Jimmy, about the Europeans, you hear a lot of nice talk, a lot of denunciation of Russia since the invasion of Ukraine. However, they're still buying Russian petroleum products, Russian oil and gas. They're still buying that. They keep saying, "Well, yeah, we're going to draw that down, and then we're going to make sure that that's all cut off by the end of 2027." now. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You're criticizing and you're denouncing the Russians, but you're still buying from them. If you were serious about it, you'd cut it off yesterday. But yet it's going to continue for another 5.5 years.
Those poor Ukrainian people don't deserve this. This is a second Holocaust. They had the Holodomor. Now it's death by freezing. And this is all out in the open. The world, the UN, nobody's doing anything.
Yeah.
Those poor people kind of left on their own to fight.
Yeah, and what do you get? You get a reverse disinformation campaign by the Russians, and then you get this. This is from a few hours ago. This is Putin meeting with the rabbis. Don't you love it when he does this? Yeah, and he kowtows to them. He was laying flowers. Putin was. I've got the clip of that too. He was laying flowers on his late brother's grave yesterday, and then of course he crossed himself as he laid the flowers. So you see, they're a multicultural Christian nation.
Yeah, Michael Savage says that Putin is a devout Christian.
He's a devout murderer. He's devoted to murder.
He's a KGB. You don't become a godfather in the mafia or a head of the KGB without being a bad person. I don't know how people could be this stupid.
Jacob Burckhardt said power is evil, and he was a great cultural historian. And of course, you have Lord Acton, who said power tends to corrupt absolutely. And this is the lesson of history, going back all the way to the ancients, to the Greeks and Romans. We see this over and over again. You could read about it. It's normal. That's why we developed systems of checks and balances. It's not democracy we have in the West. No. It's a system of checks and balances, as described by Polybius, as described by the founding fathers, who, by the way, they were thinking of Polybius when the people who drafted the federal constitution put it forward. In fact, in the ratification of the document for the state of Virginia, they read Polybius into the record. Polybius famously wrote a piece in his History of Rome on the Roman Constitution as being a mixed government of checks and balances, where you have a little bit of democracy, a little bit of monarchy, a little bit of aristocracy. And he said this prevents the simple forms of the state from degenerating from corruption. And this is what we have. We have an additional problem in the modern state. We have the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is not elected. It's not accountable. It's a permanent government. And they have incredible powers, especially since Roosevelt and the New Deal, where they have the discretion through what we call their administrative courts, like the family courts, like the courts that arbitrate, unemployment insurance, right, between employers and employees. These kind of courts, there's no juries. These are like star chambers. And this is a very serious violation of the Constitution. This cannot be constitutional. But because we adopted a welfare state, we let it slide. And the Supreme Court hasn't even acted against it. It's an amazing thing. And this is our downfall. We now have, what is it, $38 trillion in debt, largely from the welfare state that we cannot pull back on. And of course, once the government got into the business of taking care of people from cradle to grave, there's nothing left for the defense of the country, or less and less left for it. And so our defense industries have rotted, and we've exported our industries to China and Mexico and the Philippines and India, and we can't manufacture anymore. This is not an accident. This has been arranged. This has been crafted.
And
right?
It's in writing.
Yes.
When you have the senior executive service. These are the permanent bureaucracy in Washington and throughout the country. And meanwhile, you have the separation of powers. Each part of the government is supposed to be jealous of what they control, so each one is competing. In other words, they don't let it become a unified, like a dictatorship. But the communists get people before they get into the bureaucracy. So they graduate from school, college, university, they get entry-level jobs. 10, 20, 30 years later, all those people moved up there at the highest levels of businesses, of the foundations, in the government. And in the Communist publication, they say when we're in charge, when we're in power, we're still going to have the separation of powers, we're still going to have the court system, we're still going to have the media, but they'll have class content. Meaning instead of being in position to defend the existing capitalist order, they're going to be weaponized to tear down the capitalist democratic order. So that's basically Czechoslovakia in 1948. The Soviets, right, Czechoslovakia in 1948 is the model for the West. And it's been implemented in America and worldwide. Get in the government, get in the media, shape people's opinions, shape what they think they know, and that shapes how they vote. And the communists do that for decades, so now they could have elections and win, especially if they're called democratic socialists. And Gorbachev took away the image of the enemy, not the enemy. He took away the image of the enemy. Gus Hall, Soviet agent, head of the American Communist Party, was pushing Bill of Rights socialism. It creates the illusion you could have an expanded welfare state, so to be soft socialism, but no dictatorship. And now you see it's bullcrap. Wherever it took hold in America, it's more militant. Now they're out in the street willing to kill people who oppose their revolution. This is happening right in America, and it's happening worldwide. And it was all written about prior to what's happening now in the communist publication, both Soviet and American.
We're monopolizing some time here. Trevor, would you like to get in on that conversation?
As Jeff said, this 26 is going to be a very interesting year. And I think this will settle the question where Trump's loyalties lie, where his real plan, what his real plans are. Who wins in the administration? Does the realists, maybe the Marco Rubio types, win, or do the pro-Russia crowd win out? I think that's the big question that is going to decide the fate of the West, to be honest.
Well, right now, all eyes are on Iran. We've got some time left. We can discuss what's going on with Iran. So, apparently, as of a few hours ago, I'm told that the peace talks, quote, peace talks, fell through. And we've got a very large naval armada sitting right off of their coast.
So there have been reports of the Chinese shipping in large quantities of material, or maybe even troops. Yeah. I don't know.
Chinese and Russians, yeah.
Yeah, the Russians have ordered an evacuation of their people, obviously their civilians, etc., from the country. So, why is Trump doing this now, when he had the Iranians on the ropes after the bombing of their nuclear facilities and let them off? Did he not expect this to happen?
Yeah, we knew that they were going to regroup. And then now, of course, you've had the internet was cut off there when the protests started all throughout the country. And I've heard numbers as high as between 60 and 80,000 that have been gunned down by the Revolutionary Guard Corps.
They'll be going house to house now, just arresting people and shooting them.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing is going on, but we're setting up to go in there supposedly. I don't know. That's the thing with Trump is you don't know what he's going to do until it's actually done. Just like the last strike that we carried out on Iran, it was, well, I don't know. I'll let you know in 2 weeks. And then 6 hours later, while everybody was asleep, we put a couple of GBUs down some vent shafts and everybody went home.
Well, look, Jeff, look, what's Jeff's more of a military guy than I am. What's he going to do? He's going to sit off the coast. If he does do something, he's going to sit off the coast and bombard the hell out of facilities. I can't imagine anybody's going to put any boots on the ground. But the Iranians will retaliate, and maybe others will retaliate as well. What do you think is going to happen, Jeff?
Just on this point, I don't think we're going to hit oil infrastructure. I don't think that's our goal here. I think it's going to be
military infrastructure.
Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
If you look at Trump's behavior, what Trump always does, and this is what he does, he threatens, he gives an ultimatum. He's a bully. I mean, look at he called some senators and congressmen. He said they should be tried and hanged, right? Which of course accelerated death threats against those particular senators and congressmen, women. This is bully behavior. This is how you behave when you're always making threats. This is the pattern. He threatened Venezuela and then he kidnapped Maduro. He threatens Ukraine. He threatens Russia. The Russians have that, they call him Taco. Trump always chickens out, right? TACO. He's done the same thing. He's given an ultimatum to Iran. But you will notice that, and in the same thing, he said he was going to get Greenland the hard way, right? He doesn't carry out his threats. He carries out an action, which then he claims victory for. But it's not the action that you would really be afraid of. And so the Iranians have reacted in a way one might expect of someone who's really studied what he does. They have refused to acknowledge the threat, to be able to give into it. They, of course, will brace for attacks on their bases, attacks to try to kill the Ayatollah or to try to kill generals or to kill bases. But we know in modern warfare, if there is not a trained armed guerrilla force on the ground behind the civilians, the bombing won't make any difference. It will cause damage and disrupt IRCG units, but the units in a few days will recover and be able to suppress the population, kill. They've got 41,000 people under arrest under death sentence in Iran. They've killed between 12 and 20 something thousand people in the street. We don't know how many of the 41,000 have already been executed. So we're talking about a massacre of over 60,000, maybe 70,000 people are going to die if the U.S. doesn't intervene in a serious way. I am very skeptical that his intervention is going to be serious. I think he is going to do something he can declare victory. Nothing will really change. Just like in Venezuela, the regime didn't change. Maduro's under arrest, but they say, well, he's just on vacation. Just joking. But he's, Delcy Rodriguez is only the temporary president. The real president is still Nicolas Maduro. So he doesn't change anything by doing these things. It's and just like he goes to Davos and says, oh, I'm not really going to invade Greenland. Of course, he wouldn't because it's illegal by the Washington Treaty. He would. Yeah. And by the way, I'm going to make a prediction here. Trump is going to be impeached and he will be convicted by the Senate. I now make that conclusion based on what he has done in the last few days.
That's interesting because you always warn against predictions.
Yes, never make predictions, especially but this one's really easy to make.
Yeah.
When the Democrats get control, they will ask for his head. And because he has threatened Republican senators now, he has been threatening their reelection. If they don't do what he says, and you know what? I think it's always a mistake to threaten people unless you can kill them because they will get even with you. And if he's impeached again by the House, this is the perfect opportunity for those Republicans who are afraid of him. And by the way, fear is something that causes people to lash out. They are afraid of him. They will say, gee, this evidence is pretty good. I think he's guilty. They will convict him. I think now it's reached that point with his own party.
Yeah. I think absolutely you'd have a substantial number of Republicans who would vote to convict on even the flimsiest of evidence.
Yeah.
And but then you get J.D. Vance.
Yes. Yeah. But at
least they're not scared of him.
They're not scared of him. They might be able to. He has been a senator. Was a member of that club. And I think the thing is that that Vance is not as smart as Trump, but he's not as intimidating. He's not this intimidating bully. And I think they'd rather have him than Trump. They can deal with him. He would be a 2-year president, a lame duck, and they would have it over him, they would expect. So this is what I think we're going to get. I think that's what the second half of the Trump administration looks like.
Yeah, I think that's very likely, Jeff.
You mentioned Delcy Rodriguez. She's and I'm watching the speeches that she's giving in Caracas, and they had their first assembly with her up there giving a speech, and she's talking out of both sides of her mouth, as a good comrade would do. She acknowledges that the administration, they've got a great working relationship, and she's happy to take the invitation to the White House, and she's going to be going there in the coming days. But then again, after the news cameras are off from the U.S. and it's back to domestic television, we have no intention of working with the U.S. They're not going to tell us what to do. No one dictates us to
right.
what to do. And we're a government that governs for the people.
Yeah. Same thing that the Iranians are basically saying in response. In fact, Iranian TV showed interviews with Russian officials in Moscow commenting on it.
The Ayatollah spoke in Russian.
Yes, he did. And basically to underscore the fact that Iran is really a Russian province. In effect, that's why he did that. And it's like, you're attacking Russia when you attack us. Look, he went to Moscow State University. He is a Russian agent. Iran is a Russian province that just happens to abut, Azerbaijan, another Russian province that pretends to be independent. This is the extended Soviet Union. And what we have here in the United States is Trump has disastrously destroyed the right and is damaged the Republican Party very badly. And there's no denying it. We have a serious problem with the left and with the communists, but you have to handle these things correctly.
Yeah.
You can't handle them this way.
Yeah, and what do we have? We had, we had the head of what is now Syria. Assad is now gone. Of course, he went to Moscow. But we had the head of the Syrian interim government meeting with Trump at the White House. Now all the European leaders are talking about how great this guy is. Right? Never mind the fact he was an Al Qaeda commander. Don't worry about that. The Russians pulled out of Syria. They abandoned their bases. I don't know if you caught that over the last few days.
Yeah.
However, this morning, guess who paid a visit to the Kremlin? I think that that's the president of Syria, isn't it? Yeah, he's in the Kremlin right now, taking a meeting with Putin.
Yeah, the reason why the Russians pulled out of Syria is they need all those assets in Iran.
Yeah, but you see, do you see my point here? Is they haven't really left. They're still there.
No, the Russians, that shows how much confidence. Look, the Russians did not have troops in Syria before the Syrian civil war. They had a naval outlet there.
That's right.
But they didn't need to have troops there. Where they need the troops now is Iran. Iran is now on the verge of a civil war. And so they have to make sure that their surrogate wins. But this is what they did in Afghanistan. This is what they did in Chechnya. This is what they did in Syria. They make sure that in the civil war, a rebel faction that they have gotten control of by infiltrating it ends up in charge.
And that's exactly what they've done in Syria. When Syria was starting to fall, and I was watching Lee and I were watching the flights, and I said, "This is orchestrated. All of this is planned. Yep. It's all orchestrated." They
pulled the left flank out of the line so the rebels could come in and envelop the Syrian line. They didn't. It turns out that the Assad government was now an obstacle to the unity of Syria under someone the Russians like. They didn't want to deal with this headache anymore. So get rid of Assad. And of course, that's the deal. With Khomeini, they're going to make sure if there's a successful revolution that somebody on the revolutionary side is under their control as well. They're going to try the same game in Iran.
That's right. And it's with this guy, former Al Qaeda guy. How do you think he was trained? Who do you think trained him?
In Dagestan.
Of course.
Where the other Al Qaeda leaders were trained. In the
but
1990s.
We've got MI6 and CIA that come out and at these conferences and brag about how they've turned this guy successfully. They've had dinner with him, and he's a different person now that he governs 7 million people.
Yeah.
Well, he governs a few less every day as they get chucked off windows.
Yes. So, and Assad, he's not convenient anymore. They've tried to hit him with Novichok twice. His wife has fled. She went back to London. She was MI5. So,
yeah, that's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, they poison. And it's to say, look, if Alexander Litvinenko were alive, he would be warning now that this new Syrian leader is a longtime KGB FSB agent.
Yes.
That's what he would be warning about.
His visit to Moscow today should be front page news across the West, in the U.S., the U.K., and in Europe, because all the European leaders, the Americans, everybody's embracing this guy. But no one in the Western press has said anything about that.
Yeah. And that Why does Turkey and the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia say, no, you can't use our airspace to bomb Iran? Because the Russians and the Iranians have threatened nuclear hellfire on any of those countries that assist the United States in trying to topple. And you see, without help from Iraq or the Gulf states, we can't really support troops on the ground. We might be able to send in some airborne regiments temporarily, and maybe we could supply them from Diego Garcia by air, but we can't have a large ground commitment because those countries won't cooperate with us.
Final few minutes here. We're going to have to round out. Final thoughts, Trevor?
Yeah, well, look, this is, I think, as Jeff says, this is, the world is in confusion and chaos now, largely because of the leadership coming out of the White House. The old alliances are crumbling. Everything's unstable, and people want stability back. So I think, I supported Trump getting elected. I wish him well. I hope he comes around and does the right thing here. But I think basically we're moving into a post-Trump era because he's not going to survive. He's too inconsistent and alienating too many people to do what has to be done, in my opinion.
If people want to support your work and follow your stuff, Trevor, how can they do it?
Just go to trevorloudon.com or keywiki.org.
Very good. Jimmy, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. It looks like there's nothing Trump could do. The enemy has it set up in a way so we can't fight never-ending wars. We can't fight the forever wars. We can't invade a country and topple the leader, and yet we have to topple the leader and have to go into country and fight. There's nothing Trump could do to satisfy anybody right now. The enemy has us so deep in crap, no matter what you do, it's not going to work. You had Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya. All those countries were led by people who may not have been communists, but they were all Soviet allies, even when they were fighting each other. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya, their leaders were friendly and very well connected to the Soviets. Under those leaders, there were communist parties. And when you topple the leader, what's left then is the organized communist party in those countries. This could be possibly what's going on in Iran. What would the resistance be to the radical Muslims? Well, it might be led by the Communist Party. So either way, they end up winning. Now, if you're Trump, what could you do? You got people complaining on all sides. Whatever you do, something is going to go wrong. Now, Trump is a businessman, and he's in the middle of the biggest political movement that's coordinated that the world has ever seen, at the biggest crisis this planet has ever seen. There's nobody who could figure out what to do here. If he topples the leadership, then we have to send troops in. Then we're trapped. The communists want us to be in 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 more Vietnams. We are in deep trouble. I don't think anybody could figure out what to do. It's going to take a miracle. It's going to take genius. It's going to take a lot of luck. It's going to take people defecting from the enemy side to our side. So we are really in big trouble. And we start attacking Trump and thinking he himself might be an enemy agent. We might as well just surrender now and walk into the gas chambers or face the firing squads. We are in deep, deep trouble.
No, Jimmy, we got to face reality here.
I am. That's why I'm saying we're in deep trouble.
If Trump is, there are several reasons why Trump is behaving as he does. And I disagree with the idea that nobody could figure this out. I think this is pretty damn straightforward. You
figure it out, but you don't want to send troops.
No, you don't have to. You give Ukraine the stuff it needs. You sanction the hell out of Russia. You sanction the hell out of China. And you encourage the internal movements in the evil empire to rise up. That's the way forward. That's not sending in troops.
Yeah. Instead,
the people in Iran are rising up, and they can't do it without help.
Well, they could have done it. They could have done it had Trump allowed the Israelis to finish the job earlier. Netanyahu was encouraging the people to do it. Trump called the bombing off, which gave the Iranians a chance to regroup. And so, yeah, but look, Iran's not going to stop unless Russia is stopped. You got to stop Russia and China, and that is sanctions, giving guns to Ukraine, backing Ukraine, and I think that is the way forward. I don't think this is rocket science.
Well, listen, I want to totally back Ukraine. Definitely. I want to cut off Russia. But at the same time, if you believe that Russia is threatening nuclear weapons and you believe they have them and would use them, look,
Jimmy, they're always threatening. Look, when you fear Russia,
I know that.
When you fear Russia is when they don't threaten nuclear weapons. When look, they are planning to attack us with nukes at some point. That is an absolute given. So now they're on the ropes. Their economy is screwed. They're in deep trouble in Ukraine. They've got flashpoints all over the world. Now is the time to press home the advantage when Russia is as weak as it's going to be in the immediate future. Now is the time to get aggressive.
Well, if our side, and I hear in these conversations we have here, I hear that if Russia has a back against the wall, they're going to unleash all their nukes. I think a president would be very hesitant to get in a position where Russia will unleash all their nukes. So you have this very contradictory assessment and different threats coming at you. Nobody wants to, just like when the Soviets had President Kennedy assassinated. If we had said it was the Soviets, we had to go to war, millions would die. Most people would try to prevent the idea of having millions of people dying. Now, you think maybe it's better we die now than later.
No.
Who wants to make that decision?
The only chance we have of avoiding World War III is shutting down Russia now. We're going to get World War III. We either get it, the only chance of peace we have right now is to deeply sanction Russia and let the Ukrainians take them out for us. That's the only way through this. Yes,
okay, from our
confronting
understanding,
Russia risks World War III. Confronting Russia risks World War III. Not confronting Russia guarantees World War III. That's the reality.
So I'm agreeing with what you're saying now, but there's another thing out there. There's people that think we could pull Russia away from China.
Yeah, because these are traitors.
All these ideas out there that's creating the confusion.
And that's what I'm saying. Trump is not up to discerning what is right here because he doesn't understand ideology and thinks he can do deals with Putin. He's missing the great opportunities he has and leading us to potential disaster because he's not
Trump is believing
to analyze. Well, he's got bad people around him.
Right, and nobody else is. Listen, we understand that. There's not many people out there who understand that.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
If we could make the case, we could maybe...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Trump is not up to understanding it.
Let me make
he's not up to understanding it.
Let me make a clarifying point. What's really dangerous for us is if the Russians and Chinese get into the strategic position they want, they neutralize Europe, they scare Japan, and then they have infiltrated North America and in the Western Hemisphere, and then they can launch this surprise attack, which is everything has to be just right to do this deadly blow. But what has happened is as they have been preparing for this, they stumbled in Ukraine, and now they're in this economic difficulty. Iran has stumbled for them. They've got a partial blockade on the Venezuelan oil, and now China's coming unraveled. And we didn't even mention this, but last Saturday, the two top People's Liberation Army generals, General Zhang and General Liu, were arrested. Or another story is they escaped arrest and they're with their troops. Chinese troops are marching, even though Xi Jinping has said they're not supposed to march. Beijing roads have been closed off by the army that's loyal to Xi, that's 31st Army. So you've got a split in the Central Military Commission. You've got Hu Jintao supposedly died last weekend, and so did...
this is the third time he supposedly died.
Did Ranji, what's his name? Zhu Ranji supposedly died. He's 98 years old.
Yeah.
These are the senior party elders, all supposedly died on the same weekend. These two generals are arrested, and Liu Shaoqi's son, General Liu, I forget his first name. In Chinese, the last name is first and the first name is last. He supposedly died, right? He's like 75 years old. He's retired, but he was in charge of logistics of the PLA, and he was complaining it's all corrupt because Xi Jinping put his corrupt friends in. And so what happened in 2024, in late 2024, Xi's people, corrupt people he put in the Air Force especially, and the rocket forces got purged by Zhang and by this General Zhang. General Zhang is considered the most competent, brilliant Chinese general, and he basically, there was a sort of a shift within the Communist Party Central Military Commission to him. And a lot of people were saying that Xi became a figurehead, but Xi has now struck back. And Zhang, they don't know where he is. They don't know if he's been eliminated. We don't know a lot. In the next 2 weeks, it's going to clarify. But you see the stress on China created by having to support Russia's war in Ukraine and getting ready for World War III. They're unraveling right now. China and Russia are on they're coming to the point to where Iran is right now. Russia could unravel like Iran. Iran just spent $4 quadrillion. They printed $4 quadrillion of their rial, of their currency.
And they've asked for an additional 5.6.
Okay, to stabilize their currency. I mean, they've collapsed, and this could happen to Russia anytime soon, maybe further down the line to China, because they have been trying to kickstart World War III and they have fallen on their faces. Now, I put this to emphasize Trevor's point, Jimmy. If we had a president who could just nuance this, because China's not going to start a nuclear war when they're on the verge of civil war. And Putin has quadrupled up on his bodyguard. I think, Johnny, we were following that some months ago.
Yes. Yep.
There's internal tensions in Russia. They're arresting generals in Russia. So if we just had steady leadership right now that could really do the right thing in Iran and Venezuela, and even Trump stumbling around has done enough, I think, to help push things over the edge. But it could be the decisive thing. Unfortunately, he's not. And that's a real problem.
Gordon Chang was on the radio the other day. He's supposedly is an expert on China. He laid out that the Chinese military is falling apart. It's total chaos. Then he was asked, so what's going to happen? Gordon Chang says, well, China may pull back or they may attack in a few days. In other words, nobody knows. So it's one extreme, they'll pull back and be relatively peaceful because they have their own internal problems, or they may attack. This is what Gordon Chang said. So this is what the president is hearing. He's hearing all kinds of things.
Yeah,
Jimmy, but the point is, because he lacks the understanding of ideology and principle, he is at sea. He doesn't know what to do. He's just acting on instinct.
I'm not arguing with that.
So I'm not. You can't excuse that. He's the leader. He's got to step up. And
has there been another leader who understood this stuff?
Sorry?
Has there been another leader, another president who knew this stuff? No.
I think there's a lot of leaders who would be a lot better in the situation today. I think Ted Cruz would be a lot better. I think Marco Rubio would be a lot better. I think Nikki Haley would.
So why aren't they advising Trump? So why aren't they advising Trump to this?
Anybody around him who isn't a sycophant. He thinks he knows. He thinks he can do the deals. He's had some successes. He's done some great things, but he's missing great opportunities here because he has got bad people around him, like the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, who are feeding him garbage every day, and he doesn't understand ideology or the master plan here. So, look, that's the truth.
He's like every other conservative. He's like every other conservative out there.
Okay, but it's not. He's not up to the job, and that's got to be pointed out. Because if you point that out, if you just go along and be sycophants all the time, there's going to be no improvement. Probably get worse. If you point out he's not up to the job, either he takes a little bit of heat and gets up to the job, or he gets impeached and somebody else replaces him. I think it's.
Well, I would say he's not up to the job, and neither is anybody else other than us. So we're not going to be anywhere near that.
Ted Cruz would be way better. General Kellogg would be way better. Marco Rubio. I could point to a dozen people who would do the job better right now.
Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, probably understands better what needs to be done, but he has to tiptoe around Trump. Maybe if this is going to... Now, by the way, Rubio is giving testimony before Congress today, and I haven't had a chance to see it. I'm very interested in what he has to say. I think that's going to be the most interesting news of the day.
It's been disrupted a number of times today by some code pink people. They've been hauled out in handcuffs.
They disrupted Rubio's testimony.
Yes,
that's a shame.
Yeah. So there's been at least 2 or 3 disruptions today. I've seen the arrests as they pulled.
So
them
the
out.
enemy's able to penetrate our govment's hearings publicly.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, these are public hearings, Jimmy.
That's inside. That's inside work. Yeah.
Yeah. These are not closed door hearings. These are public hearings. You got news cameras and everything else in there. The public is allowed to attend. So it does happen. So anyway, it's been a fantastic structural conversation, gentlemen. I do like it when these little things pop up like this, but we are really going to have to wind down. So Jimmy, if you want to round out your final thought, please do.
All right, I do these interviews. Actually, it's not interviews. Lee Wilbarger introduces me, and then I talk and talk and talk. So I did 3 hours, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I lay out the communists, what they're doing. I lay out the history. I remind people that conservative media celebrity missed the whole thing. Several days ago, I was on Rita Cosby, and I mentioned that I'm doing work with Lee. I gave the website I'm on, rumble.com, Jimmy from Brooklyn. She liked it. Now I'm banned from her show. I'm banned from Mark Levin. As soon as I call up and the call goes through, it immediately goes to call ending on my screen. So I'm banned from the radio for working against communism on a conservative station. The same people in the past who praised me for what I'm doing now don't want me on. This movement that keeps us in stupidity, it's not just around Trump. The entire country is buried in a web of stupidity and treason. And that's a situation we're in. So I don't blame any one person because everybody is entrapped in this, engulfed in this, swamped and overrun with it. So we are in a mess, and I don't doubt that Trump's on our side. I don't know why anybody would question that. The enemy is able to influence all sides. I try to keep them from influence. The enemy influences me greatly. It influences me to stop the enemy, not to aid them. So anyway, it's always a pleasure doing these talks. After these things, I end up needing a nap because I'm so worn out.
Yeah, I get it.
God bless everybody.
Jeff, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just, the real danger is if you use nuclear weapons in conjunction with certain strategies, if you're in position, then it becomes a threat to destroy our society. But just willy-nilly launching strikes when you're politically going down, it ain't going to happen. Nobody's going to obey your orders. Nobody's going to obey an order to launch nuclear weapons in China right now. The generals are opposing Xi. They're on the brink of a kind of civil war. They're not going to start a war with the United States when they're in that position. They're all into their own.
I hope it's not the weak look. And I hope what you're seeing is accurate.
It is. This is something that's developed over time, and we can see it. We can track parts of it. We don't understand it fully. But the same thing in Russia when Putin quadruples up his bodyguard. When generals are being arrested, when Shoigu is replaced as defense minister, when his deputy's in prison now, that there was massive we talked about corruption in the socialist system.
His deputy is not in prison. His deputy was 86th. He's dead.
Oh, is he dead now?
He's dead.
I thought he was convicted. No,
he's dead.
Okay.
He died of a heart attack on the day after Christmas.
Oh, okay. He died of a heart attack. Okay, I missed that news. That you can't keep track of the number of people they're offing and putting in jail and putting on trial in Russia. It is a purge. Why? Because the system is a sewer. It's a sewer of corruption because it's still socialist. Same thing with China. It's a socialist China. Their companies all have secret party committees in them that dictate their investment strategies. It's malinvestment. There's no money in their banks. People have to get permission from the police to withdraw money from their own bank accounts. These countries have destroyed themselves now with socialism. And because they have put the pedal to the metal to mobilize for war against us, they are imploding. And Iran already imploded. China and Russia could be next. So we just need really steady leadership here on our side, not to alienate Canada, not to threaten Greenland. Canada's never going to be the 51st state. And my last comment is, when I was in Canada, we toasted to King Charles because the King of Canada's a monarchy, is King Charles. Same thing in Australia. It's King Charles. They're a monarchy, right? And the 56 nations there's 15 countries he's the king of, and there's 56 Commonwealth nations. And if we mess with Canada, we're going to be at war with all of them, not just with Russia and China. So I just want people to understand how really transgressive Trump is with his, we're going to annex Canada. We're going to take Greenland the hard way. You don't understand. That is so stupid. He should be impeached.
And yet he's got to deal with Greenland now. Venezuela, the drug cartels are on the run. That never happened before.
He doesn't have to deal with Greenland. Greenland is a non-issue. We have basing rights in Greenland. And besides, it's 1,700 miles away. What good is Greenland for defending America when Canada is in between us and Greenland and Carney has gone to Beijing.
Yeah.
What sense does it make to take over Canada or Greenland when we've lost New York and California? I'm sorry, Jimmy.
I think, and one other point we don't want to gloss over here, you were talking about economics and the economic situation in China and Russia specifically. Russia's economy, for those that are paying attention to it, it might look like it's doing okay. It might look like it's doing well. Their interest rates are down to 16.5% to 17% at the moment. They're fluctuating between 0.5%. And their currency right now, it was 99 to 1 for the dollar, but now it's 76 to 1. And the reason that they're doing this, it's all orchestrated, it's all propped up this way because Russia is selling their gold
to China.
To China, and that's what's causing the fake boom, if you will. It's not good at all. They're selling their assets.
Yeah, no, and it's and this is the thing that I just want to end on is that we've got economic trouble with silver over 100 and what is it, 16 or 14?
We're at 116.4 right now.
Okay, and gold over 5,300, right?
Yeah, we're about to hit 54.
Let me remind you, in 2025, in 2024. Gold was 2,500 and something. Now it's more than doubled in less than 2 years. In about a year and a half, it's doubled. So we've got a problem because that reflects paper assets going away. And it's not just Russia and China and Iran nearing collapse, but in the race to the bottom, the more socialist you are, the faster you hit the pavement and go splat. And that's what we're confronting this year, on top of the military threats.
If people want to follow your work and support what you do, Jeff, how can they do it?
JRNyquist.blog and my page on Amazon for my books.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, it's been a great conversation as always. I look forward to speaking to all of you again next week. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to all the listeners. God bless everyone and have